Hello, welcome back again. As you know, this is a podcast. We're great. Yeah, I did it again. We're right here on the Great War podcast. This is our second podcast. We've broken this up into small parts.
Third part.
Sure. Who knows?
Third part.
You'll know in the title of the video.
Yeah.
Links in the description down below about what we're going to be referencing. This is where we actually get into the history of the Great War.
Where these things start to matter.
The actual history. We'll get into very much the play of strategic history after this. This gives context.
This is for all of you who've been watching.
This is going to be...
I don't really know all that much about World War I. Or some of you that are like, I know a bit, but like, what the hell happened?
It's also a great place to where you want to go if you then want to find out more. Yeah, because we'll be linking out to deeper and deeper resources, which there are plenty of.
So this is just a preface. We are not experts on World War I. We're just two nerds who have dug a lot into World War I. We've taken too many fucking classes.
We also know the experts on World War I.
We know most of the experts, a couple of which by name.
You actually do the archaeology of some of these sources and sites?
Yep. I have done
both of us have done people who have done the diplomacy of this at the research university level.
Yep, I've met a couple guys who do the tactical pieces on World War I and dissect World War I tactics to try to apply them to more modern times.
Right. With all that said, with all that said, it's a popular topic of ours. We are taking this as a hobbyist or you've done high school and you've gotten sort of the American background on war.
I took AP US history and went, man, I didn't learn anything about World War I.
Or even our standard approach to history up until usually AP US.
Yeah.
In total, for most Americans, we kind of forgot about this war.
It's terrible.
Because
we lost exactly...
we didn't have the huge casualties like other countries in Europe did, or the Canadians and the Australians.
Yeah.
And for the most part, World War II is so much more significant for us.
We really weren't in this war for long. We really didn't commit that many men.
And then on top of that, when we wanted to do something of the sort, or more importantly, when President Woodrow Wilson wanted to do something of this sort, our country didn't commit to his resolutions.
And then even when we made our resolutions to other countries, the other countries sort of looked at us and said, "You didn't do enough dying."
That's about the resolution. The important part, and this is why we're doing this in November. Yeah. This is why we have a Veterans Day here in the States.
It's Armistice
Remembrance Day. Armistice Day. Which is why 11/11/11. No.
11/11/11. 1911 in the year 1911. At the time of 1100 hours, 11 minutes, the peace accord was...
No, the peace accord is 1918.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 18. Yeah. Sorry, not 11. Why the hell am I on 11?
Yeah, with the 11... Yeah, anyways.
11th day of the 11th hour in 18.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm off.
But the war started in 11, so...
The war started in 11.
No, it didn't. It started in 14.
What the hell does 11 have to do with this? Why am I stuck in 1911?
I don't know.
Oh. I know I'm stuck in 1911.
What?
It's the Chinese rebellion.
Oh.
Oops.
We'll get to all this at another point.
Anyway.
Very sorry about that.
You get another 11 in here.
We'll get to the big point, which is the scale of this conflict.
Yes. It was massive. Almost every country on Earth was involved in some way or another, whether or not they wanted to be involved.
Or they were a neutral power being forced to be involved.
Yeah.
Or a neutral power that happened to happen to have troops getting moved right through it.
Yep. Or a neutral power that just happened to have citizens trying to move through the war zone.
Right.
For various reasons.
Or, this war had a great impact on international shipping.
Yeah.
Which is why a lot of countries not inside of Europe or that were more external to Europe had issues with this.
And some of them even picked sides because of those issues.
Right.
Or almost picked sides. Looking at you, Mexico.
Anyways, so you want to go?
I'm about to go through the grand and glorious death toll of this war, which is the true cost of this conflict. Most people would then argue it also costs materials and the time it takes to make these materials and the rest of these things, but this is where it really begins to matter, because it's not just the numbers of death, it's the percentages of the population that's dead. Because yes, World War II kills more people, but the world's bigger.
World War II's definitely more significant.
Yes.
But this one definitely showed the war that had what modern conflict would bring.
do.
And unfortunately, we did not learn from it.
Listen, we're bad at that.
Continuing
on, I'm going through the Allied powers first.
Not.
The Entente. Paper says Allies. It really
That's
does.
nice.
I don't know why. Usually Repress is better at this. Anyway, starting with Australia, because...
do the whole... What this guy did versus
the
the
entirety of the Entente. Looking at everybody. The population of the Entente at the beginning of the war was 806 million, which was sizable. Military deaths for the entire side. This is everyone, every army on the side, which is a long list, is 5,711,000, and then we just get into the smaller
Let's
numbers.
get to the more important part. So this conflict comes down to two sides.
Yes.
These two sides are the Central Powers.
Yep.
And the Entente. For the most part, the Central Powers are the easy ones to sort of list.
Yes.
Don't list them all by name.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, this is this alliance between Austria and Germany.
Yes.
That also brought in the Ottomans.
Yes. And Bulgaria. That's the much easier side to list.
They then almost brought in Italy, but then Italy's chose
They
to go
then
the other way.
almost brought in Mexico, but then that didn't happen.
Ignore all that.
Anyway.
That's one side.
The other side is quite a deal longer.
Okay. For the most part, the original cause of this conflict was a war between Serbia and Austria.
Or Austria and Serbia, depending on your view.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That then brought in Russia.
Yes.
Which then brought in France.
Which then brought in Russia, which then Germany looked at that and said, and then went straight in, which then brought in France, which then Germany did the Schlieffen Plan, I'll get to that later, which then brought in Belgium and then Britain.
So you got a whole bunch of Balkan states.
Yeah. A whole bunch of major powers.
Right. Because once Britain comes in, that also brings in all
colonies.
The Commonwealths. Belgium, because it was the unfortunate neutral.
Yeah. A couple of
France,
other minor countries like
Greece,
Luxembourg.
Italy, Japan eventually has. Well, Japan
joins
saw that there are German colonies.
Brief history of Japan covered is just fine.
Okay.
Short.
Of course, the Russians eventually. Portugal was joined. Romania.
Yep.
Montenegro. And then eventually the United States.
Yep.
Also, Brazil was a part of this, but I don't think
Brazil almost joined the Entente.
No, they had observers.
They had observers. That's not actually joined.
Anyways.
They didn't sign on.
If you want to know more about the specifics of the war, a great series is
Nichols, The Great War.
I think it's just called The Great War.
It is just called The Great War with Nichols.
And Nichols, the host. Can't forget about Flo and the rest of the guys.
You gotta remember.
And hi to all of you over there.
Yep.
We love your series. It does a week-by-week blow of what happened exactly 100 years ago.
And we'll cover major people, great events, all that sort of thing.
If you want to know a more detailed approach to World War I, if you just did the recaps month to month, it really shows you what's going on and just how long some of these battles last.
Because that is
and how many millions per battle it is. Equally another good series that just does a light recap that we aren't going to be able to cover and we should try to not cover.
Yeah.
Which means you should just read the numbers off that page.
Fine.
Extra History does a beautiful narrative. So the big one, give me the total casualties.
Total casualties
on
for the Entente. 5,711,000.
No, we're at 11,000. Yeah, almost 6 million.
Almost 6 million. And for the Central Powers, it's around 4 million.
Okay.
That's just military deaths. There are also
we'll put references down below. You can then get the blow for each country and percentages.
That's all those numbers, but before we even get to civilians.
All right. So now, do me percentage of the population.
Major countries to note for percentages of the population were Britain, in which the United Kingdom thereof, because you have to understand that Britain entailed a great deal more than just the UK at the time. The UK lost 2.19% of their entire population. Now, to preface that and to really frame it well, you have to understand that most of the British casualties were in young men, which is not a large percentage of the population.
Right. And equally, the way that they were recruited
was by village.
So at particular battle, and then they stayed in regiments according to village. So at particular battles, if a particular regiment was entirely lost,
that's the entirety of the
young male population of the village gone. So
minutes.
It is a very devastating war for Britain, all of Great Britain. Yeah. And that also includes Ireland at the time, even though probably Ulsters that do go as opposed to.
Yeah, there were Irish nationalists.
I'm not saying there aren't.
There's just smaller numbers of them. But another one to note for the Entente side, I'm just going down the paper here, is France, who was at around 4.3% of their population with deaths. And that's before we get to the 4 million injured.
But that also includes their colonies.
The colonies, yeah. So
Algeria,
Morocco,
a
particularly
bigger front of the war
than just the French population.
Uniquely,
another good one to mention is, of course, Russia. Get there.
Okay.
Russia lost around 2% of the population, and then went into a civil war. Right. This is before the Russian Revolution.
Which was the Russian Revolution that spawned the Soviet Union.
Yes. Another one to note is Romania, which is a more minor power in the conflict, lost 9.8% of its population. Sorry, 9.08%.
And then the big one.
And the big one that lots of people will probably talk about is Serbia. They lost 16% of their population.
And of course, with such a drain, that was both men and women fighting.
Yeah. It was also a large number of civilian casualties because a lot of the war happened in Serbia. Austria sort of.
They're going up against a bigger power that did take the whole country at one point.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is why this war is quite significant in other countries besides the United States.
Yes. Onto the other side, Germany had a casualty rate of 3.8%, which is very large.
Yeah, quite significant.
And they didn't have all that many colonies to have
sort of bolster.
Mostly Germans.
We were talking about Germans. Though there are colonies, and
colonial forces did serve.
Fight, and you go check out Nidell's Great War.
Mm-hmm. Another one to mention is the Ottomans. They lost a ridiculous amount of men. Although most of this is inflated by the Armenian genocide, which is almost impossible to separate out for various numbers of reasons. If you don't separate it out too well,
read the number.
It's 13.7%, which is kind of terrifying.
Ridiculous. Like we're almost up to Serbian levels on something that's the size of the Ottoman Empire. Yeah, of the time.
Which is the point.
Other to note, the Central Powers they all roughly take about 3% within the 3% range.
Yeah.
So significant casualties held by those nations.
Yeah.
And then here in the United States, we did under a percentage.
We didn't even make 1%.
So the reason why we begin to forget it here in the United States and why we don't see it blanketed in our media, goes back to this. Goes back to a larger war happened right after for us. And why these other nations do not forget
is because they had a ridiculous percentage of the population.
Right, and then deeply impacted the way countries formed. So the other thing to sort of note here is that this war occurred because of catastrophic failures of diplomacy.
Yes.
And it's simply what caused and perpetuated this particular conflict. Do you have a list of them to go over there, or
I just have a note of one particular failure of diplomacy that is sometimes talked about, but isn't nearly as importantly highlighted upon as it could have been. This was occurring during what is called the July Crisis. So, Franz Ferdinand, not the actual emperor, who is the heir of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was shot down in Bosnia by a Serbian nationalist, causing everything to hit the fan. This is during the everything visibly trying to hit the fan stage, where the Austrians and Germans are basically trying to figure out, okay, I know you want to go to war with Serbia.
Why are you going to war?
Why are we going to war with Serbia?
So for the most part, for your average sort of listener here, this is right at the fundamental cause of the conflict.
Yes.
And the problem with World War One is it isn't just that France Ferdinand gets shot and boom, all of a sudden the conflict starts. It's at this moment that we go from just having a near scuffle between two countries
in the Balkans
to now send all of the concert of Europe has to start fighting each other
viciously.
Okay, why?
And the reason why is because the Austrians didn't actually want to annex Serbia, but they never let Germany know about this. So Russia, who was not too willing to join the war if Austria was just looking for reparations or anything too minor, thought that Austria was going to annex Serbia like it just did with Bosnia and Herzegovina a couple of years earlier.
Right. Again, Russia was a close friend and ally of the Serbians because of
various Balkan problems and previous couple of wars. And the South Slavic.
They saw each other as close allies. They had religious ties.
Yes. And a large number of diplomatic ties. There were Russian dukes in Serbia.
Right.
And during all this mess, there is a German diplomat in St. Petersburg trying to figure out what they can do to keep Russia out of the war. Because Germany really doesn't want to go to war with Russia because they know that going to war with Russia means going to war with France. He doesn't get a telegram sent forward to him by somebody back in Berlin who got a telegram sent to him by the Austrian Foreign Office saying, "We just want reparations."
Right. So it wasn't even relayed to the Russians, the intentions of the Austrians.
Not even close. So the Russians were just sitting there going, "You're going to annex them, right?"
Can you put the fault entirely on that telephone or the telegram passing?
Not entirely, but it is interesting to consider.
And
one guy not quite doing his job.
And that's where we're now going to begin to go in from what this history is. And even though we did a very light overview, and we'll link out to many more places and contacts and the rest of it, as that pile of books are just sitting over there, which takes you through sort of the rise of many of these nations with the actual conflict itself.
Nations.
To why things happen, why they fall apart, to all sorts of natures and theories.
Yes.
If you're sort of into this sort of stuff, now we're getting to in the next who knows how many parts, probably 3 more parts on what could happen different. All right, see you next. What was that?
All right, click the wrong button. Excuse us, guys.